Well, to talk about this a bit more, we're now joined by former Deputy Prime Minister Sheila Copps, Tim Powers, who is the chair of Summa Strategies, and Mélanie Richer, senior consultant at Earnscliffe Strategies. Welcome to the three of you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Ms. Copps, I'm going to start with you here because I do want to set up Alexandre Trudeau, who will be testifying tomorrow before the Ethics Committee. Now, it was the Prime Minister's brother who really expressed his desire to appear before the committee in that interview with Le Devoir. But is this a mistake, rather? He wants to be making this argument about the Trudeau Foundation, but I wonder if this is actually the venue where he'll be heard.
Well, it may not be the friendliest venue because obviously the majority on the committee are out to try and make a link that frankly, I think he's there to defend the work that he's done for the last decade with the foundation donors and also with the students who've received doctorate degrees, et cetera, et cetera. So he's got a good story to tell. He is a filmmaker himself by background, and hopefully he'll be able to weave his story. But I do suspect that there'll be quite a few around the table who don't necessarily want to hear his story and want to make their own film. And it's not going to be positive for him. But I do think that there's also a danger that if they carry it too far, it could blow back on them and maybe allow some balance in this debate.
Tim, what's your take on it? I wonder if there is any advantage for the foundation, or really for the Prime Minister, for that matter, to hear Sacha Trudeau speak.
I like Sheila's film analogy. I'm sure the Conservatives do want to turn it into the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I don't see the advantage of Sacha Trudeau being there. I'll give Sheila the point that no doubt he is passionate about the work of the Trudeau Foundation, and it's certainly something I think their family has had great pride about. But I think it's gone past that at the moment. So him being there, at the very minimum, gives the Conservatives and those who are frustrated with everything that's happened with the government's management of the Trudeau Foundation story more of an opportunity to get at that story again. Whenever somebody with the name of Trudeau, fairly or unfairly, appears before a committee, it's going to generate news, and those news links will be driven towards the challenges at that foundation. So I'm sure that passion is driving him, but politics is what is going to be played out tomorrow.
You know, Mélanie, Ms. Copps outlined the fact that this committee is dominated by opposition MPs. Talk to us about the kind of scrutiny that Sacha Trudeau does face when he testifies tomorrow.
For sure, he's going to be up against, like Ms. Copps has said, and like you just said, against opposition MPs. So, is there actually going to be an ability to get to the truth and to get to transparency for people? Is he actually going to be able to lay out the way that he sees this play out? I don't know. We haven't really seen opposition MPs use committees in a super strategic way. It's usually to kind of punch each other and to mudsling a little bit, whereas people at home are really looking for the truth behind this. They're really trying to figure out what happened and what we can do to not have this foreign interference happen in the future. So I don't know how his appearance tomorrow helps that. I also would be remiss to say that the Prime Minister has been working since he's been elected in 2015 to not have family members appear at committee, and him kind of putting his hand up and saying that he wants to do that goes against all of that work, and also I think kind of sets a precedent where now it is okay for family members to be invited and to be questioned by opposition members, which I don't think is in the interest of really any government, whether it be the Liberal government or whoever is government next.
Well, of course, we're going to watch that testimony very closely tomorrow. But, the whole issue with the Trudeau Foundation, of course, has to do with that donation with links to businessmen from the People's Republic of China. And right now, there's another issue, the revelation that China's state security was actually targeting relatives of Conservative MP Michael Chong. Now, that operation was apparently aided by a Chinese diplomat posted here in Canada. Ms. Copps, Conservatives are accusing Liberals of knowing about this and doing nothing. Is there any way the Prime Minister did not know this was happening?
Well, I mean, obviously the operations of the security service aren't necessarily always brought to the Prime Minister's office. So I would say that there's probably a very good possibility he didn't know. And if you saw Mr. Mendicino in the House today, Mr. Mendicino in the House, he basically said they've started getting briefings more recently. But I know when I was in politics, we used to get off the record briefings from Margaret Bloodworth and people from CSIS, and usually they didn't even use names. And our view as politicians was that this is a matter for the police and for the RCMP and not a matter for us. So he wouldn't be the person talking to Michael Chong or to his office. That would have been the responsibility of the RCMP or the security establishment figures who think his family is under threat.
Mm-hmm. Tim, what do you make of the issue? Because certainly the government's taking a battering over this in the House.
Well, no surprise they're taking a battering over it. And I think if we've learned anything over the last number of weeks and months, there is, to put it politely, Michael, an unhealthy tension between some elements of the security service and the sitting government. And that continues to play itself out. That maybe is the greater concern in this whole story, despite what is potentially happening to Mr. Chong. So I don't think the Liberals are going to win the benefit of the doubt on this one, even though, as Sheila points out, there may be legitimacy to their argument, but I think that legitimacy has long since faded because of what we've seen on the front pages of the Globe and Mail and what we've heard from Global Television about how they see, or people in the security services see, this government being asleep at the switch on certain aspects of national security as it relates to the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. Melanie, what do you make of this issue? Because again, the Conservatives are saying that the government knew about this, but right now there's pushback from the government saying, no, we're just looking into it right now.
Right. To Tim's point, had the government actually gone ahead of this when this first broke into the news and said, listen, this looks concerning, we're going to look into it, and we're going to do everything we can to protect our elections going forward, I think we'd be in a very different position right now. And I think the government would have probably earned a lot more goodwill than they currently have. But as it took them so long to even address that this was a legitimate problem and address the fact that they needed to take a look at it. So now that we're here and we're hearing this news about Michael Chong, it's hard not to, for like a regular person watching at home, it's hard for them not to be like, well, obviously they knew. They've been, dodging this answer all along. So had they gone ahead of it, had they, taken it seriously from the get-go, I think they would be better positioned to come out and say, to Sheila's point, that, this isn't something that the PMO would have dealt with. This isn't something that the Prime Minister himself would have had to address. But again, hindsight, and hopefully for the next time they're able to get ahead of it instead of continuously being behind and not responding in a way that really makes Canadians confident that they're taking this seriously and that they're doing everything they can to assure the protection of our elections.
Mm-hmm. I have less than a minute here, and Ms. Copps, I'm going to end it with you, actually. What would...
And say that, when you're in politics, I remember at one point I had a man who came to my mother's office and threatened to kill me with an Uzi. And I had to call the police myself, and they said, well, this isn't a political issue, it's the RCMP. This is for real. He ended up going to court and was deemed mentally ill, and he had previously stabbed a reporter. And I was told, this is a police matter, you stay out of it. So there's lots of threats that happen to parliamentarians across the board. The relationship between the police and Parliament is also mystifying even to parliamentarians. So it's not like they don't want to do anything, but if you responded to every claim and threat that went off on every parliamentarian, that would be all you'd be doing.
Well, with that, that is time. I really appreciate that insight, Ms. Copps. Thank you for it. So Sheila Copps, Tim Powers, Mélanie Richer, thank you for joining us this evening. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.